Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everybody. My name is Oliveros, and I am the Executive Coordinator of the Agroecology Coalition. Many thanks for joining us today as we present to you the Agroecology Finance and Assessment and Tracking Tool. Well, the discourse on agroecology has grown tremendously over the last decade, encompassing the 2014 and 2018 FAO International Symposium on Agroecology. And driven by a wide range of actors, agroecology is gaining recognition as a science, as a practice, and a movement, and a powerful tool for food systems transformation. Organizations and networks in support of agroecology have flourished at international, regional, national, and local levels, producing various research and knowledge products, policies, declarations, strategies, programs, and specific concrete initiatives on the ground. Even a few years ago, agroecology constituted a very small proportion of not only official development assistance, but also of the ODA portion dedicated to agriculture. Today, overall agroecology funding seems to be on the rise. Bilateral donors and large multilateral agencies such as the European Commission, IFAD, PMZ, SDC, Italian Cooperation, and IDRC have dedicated envelopes and project funding for agroecology programming as part of their development and research programs. New actors with funding portfolios such as multilateral development banks and philanthropy are taking interest in agroecology. But how much is being invested in agroecology and what is its trajectory? In today's webinar, we will learn about the Agroecology Finance Assessment and Tracking Tool, why it is important, and what are the new features introduced since its launch 2 years ago. We will also hear from some of the early users of the tool who will be providing feedback and insights after having used them in different ways. But at this point, let us watch a video message recorded earlier by Daniel Moss, the Agroecology Fund co-director and the co-facilitator of the Coalition's Working Group on Finance and Investment together with Germany. He will talk about the importance of using this tool. Let's watch his video.
Good afternoon and good morning, wherever you may be. Thank you, Oliver, for the introduction and the opportunity to provide some background on the Agroecology Finance Assessment Tracking Tool. Hello, my name is Daniel Moss, and I speak to you today with two hats on. One as co-director of the Agroecology Fund, and the other as co-chair with Yasmin Hundorf of GIZ of the Agroecology Coalition's Working Group on Finance and Investment. I'd like to offer a few quick comments as to why and how we developed the tool that we're discussing today. As background, some years ago, funders began to gather informally alongside annual meetings of the FAO's Committee on World Food Security. The idea was to get to know each other better and seek collaboration opportunities for deeper and better investments in agroecology. Wouldn't it be marvelous, we wondered, if we could sit together around the same table and speak more or less the same language to analyze our investment dockets? A common tool would help us all to assess the degree to which we adhere to agroecology principles and show potential investors what effective investments look like. Our hypothesis and hope was and still is that such an exercise could strengthen relationships among donors, introduce a certain accountability among us, inspire learning, and inspire others to invest in agroecology at a time when global polycrises increasingly require agroecology's regenerative power. A public database of these investments, with anonymized data as appropriate, could potentially motivate other funders and investors, leading to a rising tide of agroecology financing. That financing, as we all know, is urgent. The Global Alliance for the Future of Food published a report last year finding estimates of annual transition costs to agroecology-based food systems to be between $250 and $430 billion. Agroecology is severely underfunded. Certainly, we hesitated in undertaking the development of a tool since many frameworks already exist within donor institutions and it's a time-consuming task. But when we looked at existing studies and tools, we found that the lack of a common definition of agroecology and diverse accounting methods for agroecology investments made comparability and aggregation difficult. Why not use the 13 principles of agroecology as our framework, we wondered, which have emerged through a thorough consultation process. The Agroecology Fund and other donors like GIZ began to invest in the creation of a tool. As the Agroecology Coalition gained strength over these past years, it made sense to move the effort into the Working Group on Finance and Investment. The development of the tool was led by a diverse cohort of 20 experts from various organizations and backgrounds, including donors, researchers, and civil society representatives. The tool offered a relatively simple way for donors and investors to analyze project portfolios and assess the amount of funding that actually contributes to agroecological transformation of food systems. Now, almost 3 years after the development of the tool, with back-end support from Statistics for Sustainable Development, over 70 organizations have registered to use it, and a state of funding report is expected to be published in the coming year. The work hasn't been without challenges. First, we've not been able to compile a comprehensive baseline of current financing against which to measure our progress over future years to reach the aforementioned $250 to $430 billion goal. It's proven methodologically impossible due to differing definitions of agroecology and the broad variety of approaches and analytical frameworks. Certainly, there have been many important analyses over the past years. Some have been internal stock-taking exercises of agroecology portfolios by development agencies like IFAD and GIZ, and others have been published research by civil society actors like BioVision, IPES Food, and the University of Louvain. What we conclude from the findings of these reports is that only a minority of funding for agriculture and food systems, sometimes extremely small, is allocated to support agroecology. Even smaller are the funding flows to grassroots organizations and networks, which we know to be a crucial ingredient to scaling agroecology up and out. With the tool now actively promoted by the Agroecology Coalition, these limitations can be overcome. Going forward, we will actively encourage and support donors and investors, including governments, to use the tool to assess and track the level of their investments in support of agroecology. With full buy-in and encouragement from the Agroecology Coalition's over 380 members, including over 50 governments and major bilateral and multilateral funding agencies, we'll accumulate data. Although busy funders will always be time constrained to upload their data, we remain optimistic that in coming years we'll be able to collect a robust data set. Our intention is that biannually we'll be able to publish a State of Agroecology Financing Report. A report like that, when used by donors, practitioners, and advocates across the world, can help make transparent and drive additional agroecology financing. That's an urgent goal to resolve for our planet's food, climate, and diversity crises. Thanks so much for listening. Thank you for using the tool, and we look forward to your feedback. Bye-bye.
But we are grateful to the whole Agroecology Fund team, and a number of them are joining us today for the support and the collaboration, not only in developing the tool, but also in co-organizing and co-hosting this webinar. So, what does this tool look like, and how does it work? Let's now turn over to both Emile Frison, our senior advisor, and Dave Mills of Statistics for Development, who, together with the support of Carlos Barahona, have developed the tool into something that is operational and exploitable. Over to you, Emile and Dave.
Thank you. Hello to everybody. Indeed, this finance assessment tool has been designed to analyze, assess, and track the funding streams going towards agroecology. Next. So why did we develop first the framework that is the basis of the tool? We wanted to assess how much an initiative contributes to an agroecological transformation. This is done based on project documents. It's an ex ante analysis, so it's not looking at the results of an initiative, but rather what is the intention of a project, of an initiative, and how likely is it to contribute to an agroecological transformation. It will document the evolution of investments in agroecology to foster increased investments, as already mentioned by Daniel, and also it can be used to provide a guide for project proposal development and for formulation of calls for proposals, giving us hints on what are the kind of things that should be thought of in developing proposals, projects, and initiatives. And finally, to guide investments more broadly for agroecological transformations. Next. So the framework that is the basis of the tool was developed, as was already mentioned by Daniel, by a group in a meeting that was hosted by BMZ in Berlin in 2022. And there we decided to base the assessment on the 13 principles developed by the high-level panel of experts of the Committee on World Food Security. And this is done in 2 steps. The framework is conceived into 2 steps. Next slide. The tool is an online tool developed by Stats for Sustainable Development based on the framework that was developed, and it's aimed at donors and investors in agroecological transformation so that they can assess how much their projects or project portfolios are likely to contribute to the agroecological transformation. So it is primarily aimed at project portfolio uses, analysis, but it can also be used as a tool to evaluate proposals received by donor agencies. Next. So one thing that is important to record is that the data that are entered in the system, in the tool, continue to belong to those that entered the data, and they are available only to that institution. And only anonymized reports based on aggregate analysis will be published. So the assessment, as I said, is made into 2 steps. First is the identification of what we call red flags. Are there any things in a proposal, in an initiative that are obviously going against agroecological principles? If one of these is detected, then you don't have to go into a detailed analysis. You just can say the program or initiative or project is not contributing to an agroecological transformation. And then the second step is the evaluation, as will be described by Dave. And there is the possibility also to add your own evaluation criteria if your organization needs to report on things that are not explicitly included in the 13 principles. You can add those criteria so that you can also report on these aspects without having to do a separate evaluation or assessment exercise. So I pass it on now to Dave, who will be running us through the use of the tool. Dave, it's yours.
Thanks very much, Emile. So yeah, let's go into some detail on how the online tool actually works. Each institution has its own separate environment. This is important for data privacy and data protection. Within each institution, you can create any number of portfolios, and these are collections of initiatives that are funded by your institution. You can use portfolios to organize your initiatives in any way that is most effective for you. In the example on the screen, portfolios are defined by region, but they could be defined differently by topic, by funding source. If you already have an organization structure, you can use that. And then within portfolios, you have initiatives, and this is the level at which the actual analysis is conducted. One other key feature about portfolios is this ability to have testing portfolios. And this is one of the things we got feedback on from early users. They wanted to use the tool to analyze projects that, for various reasons, should not be included in the global funding flow analysis. So projects that were still at the proposal stage that may not yet be approved, or projects that were not actually funded by those institutions. For example, we had requests from PhD students who wanted to use the tool for analysis of work, or test projects where users wanted to test a hypothesis or test an example of how would it work if ... So shortly after launch, we added this ability. So for each portfolio, you can say yes or no that it contributes to the global funding flow analysis. So for the actual initiatives, there are 2 ways to enter your initiatives into the platform. You can manually add them using a web form, we have also provided an Excel template so you can import multiple initiatives at once. Both approaches require some effort for the uploading organization, but we've tried to strike the balance of making it as simple to upload as possible, but still having the information that will be useful for the future analyses. And once you've entered your initiatives, you can find them on the platform on the list page that I'm showing here. You can search, you can filter. There are various options that you can use to organize and find your initiatives once you've entered them. So once you've entered your initiatives, you move on to the actual analysis process. And as Emile said, the first step is the red flags. This section takes you through each of the red flags defined in the framework and asks you to select yes or no for each of them. Any answer of yes will end the analysis at this phase, but if all are answered as no, then the tool will prompt you to continue on to the second part of the analysis. And one important note, you don't have to do the complete analysis in one session. You can save your progress at any time. There are save buttons at the bottom of each page in each step of the process. The next part is this main part of the analysis. This is probably what will take the most amount of time. And you are asked to critically assess the initiative against each of the 13 principles of agroecology. You can assess the principles in any order. And again, you don't need to complete them all in one session because this might be quite a bit of effort depending on how deep you go into the project. But you can save your progress at any stage and return later on. And you can see on the list of initiatives which initiatives are actually currently in progress, so you can get back to them quickly. For each of the 13 principles, you're asked as the main data point to give a rating between 0 and 2. And definitions for these ratings have been created within the framework, and they're shown within the tool as you are doing the assessment. You're also asked for a comment. This is a free text comment, can be as detailed as you want it to be to help give context for that rating. And then finally, you are asked about the presence of specific examples or indicators that have influenced your rating. Each principle has a small number of built-in examples that were written and defined by the team that as we built the framework. But you are also encouraged to add your own that may be directly relevant to this specific project. You can also mark some principles as not applicable. For example, if an initiative doesn't actually have anything to do related to soil health, you may decide that the principle is not relevant. And then you can tick this box. And that means this principle is not included. It's not counted when calculating the final score for this initiative. However, some principles are always considered relevant. These are the more equity-focused aspects of agroecology, including the co-creation of knowledge, fairness, social values and diets, and participation. These are things that are considered always relevant for any project that addresses agroecology. So in addition to the red flags and the 13 principles, as Emile mentioned, there is an optional final step. Your institution can choose to define any number of additional criteria for the assessment. And we included this part because we know that while the 13 principles cover the definitions of agroecology with this international standard, we know they don't always fully cover things that are of particular importance to specific institutions or specific programs. So, if your institution has decided to add additional criteria, after completing the main part of the assessment, you'll be taken to this final page where you can enter values for each additional criteria. And the process here is exactly the same as for the principles. You're asked to enter a rating, a comment, and specific examples that address it. The definitions that are shown for each of these additional criteria come from your own institution, and you can add those into the platform if you are an administrator for your institution. Now, these criteria are not included in the global funding analysis because they are specific to each institution. However, the data that you enter here is included in data downloads that are available to your own institution, so you can use these data in your own internal analysis in any way you need. After completing the assessment, you can review the results. We have a page here for showing individual initiatives, where you're shown key information on the initiative, and a radar chart showing the scores for each principle. You also see the overall score for the initiative and how that was calculated, which is important if any of the principles were marked as not applicable. You also get the breakdown of the data entered for each principle, including the examples and indicators that were added. And this entire page can be viewed online, or it can be downloaded as a PDF. We also have provided a summary dashboard, which shows a high-level summary of your institution's initiatives. This has 3 tabs: a summary tab, which shows counts of your initiatives at different stages of analysis, the overall score, and a calculated agroecology-focused budget, which is calculated by taking the budget of each individual initiative and then multiplying that initiative score as a percentage. So larger projects with higher budgets have are naturally higher weighted for this agroecology-focused budget. The next tab shows a summary of the red flag assessment. It lists the red flags and shows the percentage of initiatives of yours and of others that have passed. And we've included the aggregated summary of all other institutions from yours, so that you can get a comparison of how well your institution or your portfolio is doing compared to others. And the third tab shows a graphical summary of how well your initiatives do per principle. On the left, again, is your initiatives, and on the right are the aggregated results from other institutions. And here, the green bars show the proportion of initiatives that score very highly for the principle. The yellow bars show the proportions that are scoring good but not very high. And then the red bars show the proportion of initiatives scoring less than 0.5. And non-applicable counts are shown with a thin grey line. On the web page, you can hover over any section to see the actual numbers. And if you want to export this graphic, you can right-click and save it as an image directly from the platform. This whole dashboard can be filtered in different ways. You can choose to show your entire set of programs or one single portfolio. And then you can filter by location, by initiative category, by start and end dates, and by budget. And you also have an option to filter the type of institutions that you are comparing your initiatives against. And these filters are applied to yours and other institutions' initiatives, so you are comparing like for like. But one important note is that if at any point the set of filters results in not enough information to make the other institutions' initiatives anonymous, then you don't see that results. We want to make sure that it's still anonymous, and so you might add so many filters that you end up with only 2 initiatives from other institutions. At that stage, we don't show the results for privacy purposes. To support the users of the framework and this tool, we have a support page within the site itself. We created a short series of videos on how to do some of the key activities within the platform, adding initiatives, entering the assessment data. And there's also a way to provide feedback directly through the tool, and that comes to our team. We make a point of collecting up all user feedback and then working with the Agroecology Coalition to bring new features to this to this platform, and we want this to be a living platform so that it continues to evolve over time based on the needs of the users. There is also a PDF guide available through the Agroecology Coalition website, and this supports users of the framework, whether you're using it online or whether you want to use it offline for your own project development or calls for proposal. And one final note about this tool. As I said, this is an ongoing project. After the initial launch, we were really excited getting lots of interest from different organizations. We had excellent feedback from the first set of users. And I would like to particularly thank the team from GIZ who worked with us really closely to understand how to improve some of the key workflows within the tool. And that feedback has been used to release a version 2.0, which is ultimately quite a small update, but it has a lot of these what I call quality of life updates, including improved search, improved sorting options, and overall an improved user experience for importing and adding initiatives. We've also added some support for individuals who need access to multiple institutions at different levels. And we have improved the initiative import process. So to make it more user-friendly and to give you feedback at each step of the process. And I'm really happy that we're able to continue supporting the coalition with this tool. On behalf of Stats for SD, our intention is to continue working closely with the coalition and with everyone here using the tool to help make the tool better and help support the ongoing analysis. Thank you very much. And I pass it back to Oliver.
Yeah, thanks very much, Emile and Dave, for providing us an overview of the tool's core function and for walking us through its latest features. Of course, having a tool is one, using it is another story, right? And so at this point, I'd like to turn over to some of the early users of the tool who will share with us their reflections and experience in using it. We will first have Germany, who will have a double voice feedback. Germany is co-facilitating the coalition's finance and investment working group. I'd like to first invite Alexander Lingenthal of BMZ and then to Anja Müting-van Loon of GIZ to share with our audience your reflections and experience in using the agroecology finance and tracking tool. Over to you, Alexander, and then to you, Anja.
Yes, thank you very much, Oliver. And also thank you for the opportunity to share our experience. Like you said, my name is Alexander Lingenthal. I work in BMZ and I'm responsible, among other topics, for agroecology. And I want to give you a quick introduction and overview of the portfolio analysis that BMZ commissioned last year. And then Anja Müting, my colleague from GIZ, will get into more details because she also supervisioned the performance of the analysis. First of all, I want to give you some background to why we conducted this agroecology portfolio analysis. The German Parliament adopted a resolution in 2019 to support agroecology in development cooperation. And due to this resolution, a regular reporting was necessary. In 2019, the first portfolio analysis was conducted referring to the period from 2014 to 2018. A second one conducted in 2022, and then last year a third one taking into account as well the years 2022 and 23. All of these portfolio analysis had the guiding question: how many German development cooperation funds and projects have been used for agroecology since 2014? In the first two analyses, we used a different tool, a known tool that was based on Pimbert and Muller. and consisted of a keyword search and with regard to the understanding of agroecology, the 5 transformation levels of Gliessmann, and in the last analysis, 2024, we applied the Agroecology Finance Assessment Tool for the first time, analyzed 344 projects that we pre-selected out of more than 2,000 on the basis of DAC criteria and project titles and other criteria. Going on to the next slide, I can tell you why we decided to use the AFA tool. As others have already pointed out, Germany and BMZ supported the development of the tool from the beginning and facilitated the discussion and organized stakeholder meetings. And this participatory process led to common ownership of the tool by different organizations, donors, international institutions, and civil society actors like the EU, the Agroecology Fund, IFAD, FAO, Biovision, and others. And this, from our point of view, has the potential to create a much better comparability and greater transparency that is useful to understand where the agroecology finance system internationally stands. The method also is based on a more current understanding of agroecology using the 13 principles. It can calculate the used project funds for agroecological activities quite differentiated, which is helpful and also a step forward from our past tool that we used. And the red lines are quite clear and allow a fast check and exclusion of unsuitable projects. The tool also gives room for certain flexibility, for example, by having the possibility of selecting non-applicable for certain principles in projects that concentrate on just certain areas of all the 13 principles. I think this reflects very well the reality of some projects and also the reality of an early stage of a agroecological transition period, and that some projects are interlinked, have different focal areas. So this is quite useful. Moving on to the next slide, the main results from this portfolio analysis were that BMZ since 2014 commissioned 344 projects with an agroecological budget share of 3.65 billion euros, and that there has been an increase, especially in 2022 and 2023. Another finding was that all the 13 agroecological principles were largely covered by a lot of projects. You can see from the graphic that there are differences between the principles and that some principles were not as often covered as others, but overall there are a large number of projects that cover all the principles, and it just shows that the agroecological approach of a lot of our projects was quite holistic from the concept on. Moving on, the next steps that BMZ is planning with regard to agroecological portfolio analysis and using the tool are that we have another analysis planned for next year. And we also plan to further use the AFA tool. I don't know if it's actually an acronym that others use as well, but it stands for the Agroecology Finance Assessment Tool. And yes, and we are also at the same time interested in the further development of the tool because we see room for improvement, even though the tool is already very useful. and very efficient, but most of all, we see a certain issue when it comes to the question to what extent the tool seems to be a performance tool as well. Sometimes it's a bit difficult to differentiate or distinguish that from the actual question, what funds were used on agroecological activities when it comes to scores and ratings. So that is an area where I think it could be developed further. And we are currently also looking into a potential use of AI to just save resources and partially also avoid human errors when it comes to a subjective assessment of certain activities and criteria that can be, to a certain extent, also an area where it comes to errors. Yes. So this from my side, and now I would hand over to Anja to continue.
Yes, I will take you further into the details of the user experience, and this will be quite detailed at some points, so bear with me. But we wanted to give a clear feedback, and we really like to use the tool. But I think it's always good to give clear feedback, so we can even make it better for our next cooperation on it. So. Don't see too critical. It's just that we would like to gather all points today so we can work on it. Yes, so first of all, for the general user experience, we really like that with the tool we had clear numbers and a clear coverage of all 13 principles and a clear score. Nevertheless, we would like to have a bit more focus on the budget percentage instead of having the score, because as Alexander already pointed out, for us, it's sometimes a bit confusing. It seems as if it would measure performance, but it's not measuring performance. We are looking at only at the project proposals. So we don't know how it will be implemented and what might be in their performance differently. So we want to measure the budget, which is planned to be used. Therefore, the scoring system sometimes is a bit misleading, and we would prefer a bit more of a focus on the budget figures, because that was also the general idea of the tool, to really show how much a donor is giving to agroecology, or at least from our side, that was the idea. On the other hand, or more broadly, we really like the way you can use the online tool with different people. Like for us, it was really important that the consultant can have access, that BMZ can have access, that we from GIZ can have access, and we can all work together because it is an online tool, which is really helpful. Also, after a while, maybe when the consultant is no longer working on it, we can still work with it. The downside of the online tool is that it's sometimes a bit slow to update figures and to show the filters you have just put in. And it takes quite a long time for a person, for a consultant, to put in all the data because of the 13 principles with all its all its scoring. It takes around 30 minutes to put in a project, at least for our projects, which is a long time if you look at more than 300 projects. But we were always happy to have Dave at our hand, as he already pointed out. In between, he had to support us sometimes, and it worked always well. And we always figured out a way around if there were bugs or special demands from our side. Yes, Alexander mentioned already that there is a potential for human errors due to the big number of issues you had to put in and the big data you had to look at. And I guess it will not be getting less projects, but rather more projects we would like to fill in, and then the human error is a risk we have to keep in mind. We had to do pre-selections of our projects because we came up from more than 2,000 projects. We which could have had potential, and then we had to filter it down by DAC criteria, by project names and other restrictions. For example, at the end, we only looked at rural development projects and GIZ and KfW projects. But there would be a chance to fill in many more projects with agroecology potential. So we have to see that we can make it manageable also in this tool to have also bigger numbers of projects. Then we look at the user experience from the analysis point of view. As we already said, the 13 principles seem to be very suited to cover all aspects of agroecology. And then later on, you can also easily see where projects focus on which principles and where there are major gaps in our portfolios. And also then 0 to 2% scoring system is quite open and flexible, but at the same time, it is really difficult to have a 100% budget agroecology project with this tool, because it's nearly not possible to have a project which has on all 13 principles all 100%. While in our project budget, if it's an agroecology project which is really only focusing on agroecology, but maybe not on all principles at the same time, it would be more realistic to have a bigger, like the 100% agroecology budget pronounced for the project. So there are the nitty-gritties of having a budget calculation while also using a scoring system. Then we were a bit struggling with the project categories. You haven't introduced them today, but generally, if you fill in a project, you have to decide if it's a field project, an advocacy project, a research project, or a private business project. And our projects are sometimes a mixture, something none of these. And so that's a bit difficult for us to differentiate. We also used the comment section, which was introduced quite a lot, but then it is quite in the focus when you look at the analysis of a project. And depending on the content, it's not so helpful to have the comment, which is rather for our back of the mind to make clear that it's all calculated correctly. So so in the main pronunciation of the project analysis. And one of the biggest issues for us was that we couldn't really do the analysis of the data with the tool, but we really exported it to Excel and did all kind of filter and visualizations with Excel. That's maybe something we can also look, if that is the idea. It worked like that, but the real analysis is still working somewhere else and not in the online tool. And one issue, but Dave already knows about this. It's a bit difficult to have projects covered clearly when there are extensions or follow-up projects, and the interlinkages and relations between the projects is hard to visualize. And for us, it's led to a number of projects where it was phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, extension 1, 2, 3. And so it's a bit of a mixture if you filter, because you have like 10 projects called the same, where you always have to look for the last extension period. So the last point on this slide is that the calculation of budgets for regional and global projects is also a bit critical for us, because I guess it's due to practical reasons. If you have 6 countries doing like in the same project, the whole budget will be divided by 6. And this means it's not really realistic, or at least for our projects, it's not like every country will get the same amount of the project budget. Therefore, it's sometimes countries have a very large budget according to the AFA tool, but not in reality, because they are only a small share of one of a bigger global project. And then a few points to the visualization. These are really the nitty-gritty, so please bear with me. It is really difficult to use the visualizations currently. We saw it, the spider web and the traffic light system didn't fit to our way of visualizing the results. So we always came back to Excel. So it would be nice, at least from our side, to maybe think of different visualizations for projects and the whole portfolio instead of having the spider web, and also to have the pronunciation as like if a project or part of a project is having only 0.5 in agroecology principle X, to be called poor is not really the way we would put it, because it's great to have agroecological principles in the project. It's not a race where everyone has to have a two, but it would be good to have just different principles, covered in the project. So we would prefer not to call it poor if it's not the highest ranking. And so to come to a bit of a bigger conclusion regarding our recommendations, the first recommendation from our side is really to see if we can combine the tool with some form of AI to facilitate the analysis, because it's a real struggle for a consultant to fill in so many projects. And nowadays, with the fast development of AI, we hope that there can be a chance that we train AI with the analysis we already did with the tool, and have it then put in the project data and have AI analyze it, of course, with the consultant or someone at the back, but maybe the first analysis could be done with that support. Then we would prefer not to have the scoring system as a kind of performance idea in the focus, but rather the end result as a budget figure, to not wake the hopes that we really analyze performance, because we don't. It's, at least for us, it's a performance analysis. It's a portfolio analysis and not a performance analysis. We should only look at the project proposals, and therefore it might be misleading. Then, as I said, the visualization didn't work for us currently, so maybe we can look at different forms to present it. And the next point, filters and analysis options, especially the filters, is something Dave already pointed out that you have worked on it. So we are happy to try it out. Maybe that's already what we were looking for. And the last point, it would be nice to have more flexible options to interlink project information and project relationships, maybe also to show follow-up project, but also clustering projects to see how they are interrelating. Maybe one project is having a gap on this and that principle, while another project in the same cluster fulfill these tasks. And to show this relation would be very helpful. So this is all from our BMZ GIZ site and our feedback. Sorry for being very detailed, but we hope to improve the tool through our feedback as much as possible. So I will also stop screening my presentation.
Thanks very much, Anja and Alexander, for the very detailed feedback. I mean, it's really important to make sure that we have those very detailed feedback. We wouldn't know what to improve unless we see those details. So thanks for sharing those. Just so we can break a little bit the monotony of a series of presentation, maybe we just have a quick short response from Dave or Emile in terms of what you have heard so far, and then we can continue with the other feedback coming from the other early users. Dave or Emile, a very quick feedback?
Maybe an initial reaction. I think the suggestion about artificial intelligence and automated ways of doing first analysis is something we've been talking about already. And so that's we will be exploring in how that can be incorporated in the next phase. But maybe Dave has some more specific answers.
Thanks very much, and really excited to see this like detailed feedback. That I'm really all about the details, so that's highly appreciated. Just to follow up on the AI discussion, I think it's obvious we need to explore that from as it is a powerful tool. We need to understand how best to bring it in. I do advise we do it carefully and in a considered way. As you mentioned, that the idea of bringing in AI tools might help remove some of the human error or some of that subjectivity that is currently at the core of the analysis. The big challenge I think we have is not to replace that human error with AI error. And so I think understanding how we can bring these powerful machine learning AI tools in whilst keeping the humans in control of the overall process, I think that balance will be really important to strike. The other key takeaway I got just as an initial reaction was the understanding of, while this is not a performance tool, that's actually not made clear in a lot of the outputs. And there are a lot of things that are suggesting, well, here is your performance of the initiatives. And I think that's something definitely that we need to think about how to address. And I agree. I think having a bigger focus on the budget that is going toward agroecology, because that is the overall goal of the tool. So I think that's something we need to work on over the next year as we come to the global analysis. I think we can also use that analysis time to think again about how we can provide either analysis tools or some better outputs that for individual institutions that will meet your needs better than the existing set. Yeah, thank you very much.
Super, Dankeschön. The next is we'll hear from the European Commission. He is among the most active supporters of agroecology. We now turn to Marion Michaud of DG INPA, who will talk to us about the Commission's experience in the use of tool. Over to you, Marion.
Okay, thank you. So the European Commission also decided to test the tool. We really wanted to have a practical experience of using it, to understand how it works, to what extent it is user-friendly, how we can integrate it within our work. We were also, of course, curious about the outcome of this test in terms of the extent to which what we had tried to do in line with agroecology was indeed to be agroecological. We also wanted to have an experience to reflect further on the benefits that we could make from using the tool, not only at headquarters, but also with colleagues in delegations overseas. And of course, as it was already mentioned, we wanted to contribute to a collective initiative because the tool will make sense if it is widely used. So we first decided to focus on a sample because it was, of course, impossible to screen all our projects. I mean, those are thousands. So we decided after some reflection to concentrate on all the contracts with a budget over 1 million euros, which were contracted between 2023-2024 under financing decisions which relate to sustainable aquatic and agricultural food systems, and which were signed in 2022 from actions documents aimed at making a main contribution to agri-food systems. So using these samples, which was decided to make sure that it was representative of what had been funded at a time which was meaningful in terms of agroecology, because it was right after the EU Green Deal, the UNFSS, and under instruments which were also important and meaningful in terms of our possible engagement for agroecology. We came up with about a little bit more than 100 contracts, which was also what we could test given the human resources we could mobilize. So it was really seen as a pilot exercise on which we were possibly ready to further capitalize and to pursue. So we organize ourselves in a way that one person who was not especially conversant with agroecology, with no specific interest in it, he's here with us today, so he could also tell us about his experience as a non-conversant person with agroecology. And on this basis, I mean, of course, he was trained on agroecology. He read a lot. He was also trained on using the tool, but maybe it can be also an interesting feedback from a person not super knowledgeable about agroecology, how it is to use this tool. So he was the one screening almost all the projects, and then another expert who is very aware and very knowledgeable about agroecology. She did the quality check, and I also contributed my share on the basis of a few projects that I have within my portfolio and that I know. So basically, my observations are that the tool is quite user-friendly, intuitive, and easy to handle. For us, the main constraint, and this relates to what has been said about artificial intelligence, a big constraint is time-related and concerns the amount of time needed to read the documents, to really acquaint yourself with the project you are going to screen. Because for a big organization with a large number of projects, this may be really a challenge. Another challenge relates to the, is related and relates to the quality and the level of details of the documents. Because the tool for us to make sense has to be used at the level of projects. Because we cannot really use the tool at the level of financing decisions, because the documents related to those are not detailed enough. So for us, it really represents a massive amount of time and a massive investment in terms of labor. So really, we need to facilitate these aspects. So which is fine when the tool is being used to characterize an investment, a project in terms of its agroecologicalness, so then it's fine. But when it has to do with tracking funding flows, this is there is something to be found to make it really possible for big agencies. Also, so for us, the tool is really meant to serve those two purposes: to help to guide with the design of projects and to track funding. But then it should not be applied at the same time. Of course, for what has to be done with design of projects, the tool has to be used at the beginning. But for investment flows, intentions are not relevant, and we need to use the tool at another stage. So maybe we should agree on a frequency of specific timing to use it. I would think that we need some maybe guidance on how to use a scoring scale so that outcomes are more or less harmonized. We avoid too much subjectivity, and this makes it possible to compare between agencies, between projects, and between assessments. So for me, with Tommaso, we agreed on how to use the scores, but then Caroline, who was quality checking, had a completely different way of looking at scores, and I think that there is a need for guidance in this regard. We should also need some guidance in terms of designing the sample, still within the framework of a comparison exercise, because we need to understand what is at stake when we come up with a certain scope agency, because what has been screened, for example, by an agency may not be at all the same and may not allow the same kind of conclusion than another agency. One can focus on all the projects dealing with rural development, as it was the case with GIZ, when another agency will decide to follow on its portfolio. So, I mean, we need to, if for comparisons to be valid and meaningful, we need to know what we are comparing. So a little bit of guidance would be useful. What else? I think that examples and comments are very useful. But I mean, the examples that are being provided by the tools are very useful to guide and to understand better what is at stake under each principle. But I think that they may also present the risk that users limit their assessment to those examples, ticking or not ticking the proposed examples, but not really necessarily making the effort to assess beyond what is proposed by the tool. So this could be a limitation, and maybe I mean, linking compulsorily is not a nice way, but having to give an example to the score that you give, or several examples, should be made more compulsory, more so that there is really an engagement. What else? This would also allow us to understand better the scoring, to be able to change it, to amend it, and to discuss around it. And this would probably add some robustness to the outcome, because it would make comparison more valid. But to finish my lessons, I think that the tool is really useful to understand better and in a practical way what is at stake behind each of the 13 principles, and what finally agroecology is all about. And I think that the tool has a very strong pedagogical value. I was also interested in the fact that the tool really allows to illustrate the holistic integrated dimension of agroecology. And this is, at some point, I find it quite striking, because some projects that we would think to be very much in line with agroecology, because it was all about promoting sustainable practices and introducing good principles, could finally pour not so high, because other principles were not targeted, not addressed, because maybe more challenging to implement, because they would imply they would imply another way, a different way to do things, such as, for example, the principles like co-creation, participation, fairness. And I think that this was very eye-opening when looking at the results from assessing projects. What else? I also found that the tool was not taking account, but I mean, my experience is finally not that big, so I may be mistaken, but I saw that maybe quantities could be reflected better. The number of beneficiaries, the number of hectares brought into sustainable practices, the number of farmer field school, but to have an impact not only on the intention, but also on the scope of the intervention. So I guess this is expected to be reflected through budget considerations, but some organizations may be more cost efficient than others, and then financial dimensions and figures may not reflect the scope of what is being done. So I guess this is basically the feedback I can provide. If we still have some minutes, maybe I will invite Tommaso, who was dealing with the majority of our sample, to add on to my feedback. Tommaso, do you want to add anything?
Yes, of course. If we have time, Marion, for sure.
Maybe if you can do like a minute, summarize it, Tommaso, in a minute or so, just so we could have enough time for others to speak and also to get some questions from the audience.
Yes,
Thank you.
absolutely. I'm Tommaso from GFA, who worked with Marion on the evaluation of our sample of 100 contracts. And actually, I was not at all versed in the use of the tool, because it was the first time I was using it. So my feedback is from a complete novice on the tool. I was an analyst by trade, so I knew how to deal with project and budget analysis. And really, what I have to say, it's just a little addition to what Alexander, Anja, and Marion have said, because the good points of the tool and its clarity and its views are quite frankly evident to everybody. But one thing I would like to stress out is the time investment in uploading the data for the project. It's very massive, because in my personal experience, for example, having a sample, even if it's not that big, because 100 contracts is not that big, but when contracts are not harmonized, and information are scattered across documents, having a sort of automation in uploading the relevant information would be very good. And this, I think, where AI can come into play, actually, because it would cut a lot of time from the uploading of the details of each contract. Because contrary to what maybe is clear, is that the most time-consuming thing was not the actual evaluation, because when one is versed in agroecology and knows the principles of agroecology, actually evaluating a project based on that, it's quite easy, and it's quite fast. So it's the actual input of the data which took the majority of time. And also to come back to the scoring, I agree with what was said, basically that sometimes a score between 0 and 2 with that level of granularity, because we can give a score even 0.1 or 0.2 or 1.1, 1.2. How can I decide which is the correct score? I'm not able from my desk review of projects to decide if a principle should be scored 1.1 or 1.2. So with Marion and the European Commission, we decided on a harmonization of scoring. So we decided, okay, we will just use 0 or 0.5, 1, 1.5 or 2 to have an harmonization of scoring. Otherwise, the risk, as the previous speaker said, is that the tool will shift into not budget evaluation but performance evaluation. This is the most. This is, I think, the most important. This is the most important point I have to make, which are in line with what has been said so far. So thank you.
Thanks very much, Tommaso.
I didn't go too far.
No,
Thank
that's
you.
fine. I think it's important that the time, the time required to fill up the form, and also comparability across, and also the fact that we're looking at the portfolio, not the performance. So that has to be communicated very clearly. Let's continue and hear from the Italian experience, and we'd like to call on Elisa Pettinati of the Italian Agency for Development Cooperation to tell us a little bit more about your experience. Elisa, a te la parola.
Grazie. Thank you, everybody. On behalf of the Italian Agency for Development Cooperation, we started using the tool within the Office of Food Security and Rural Development, which I belong to, and I'm also the focal point for the Agroecology, for following the works of Agroecology Coalition. So I coordinated a group of colleagues who were in charge together with me to deal with the assessment of our portfolio. First of all, I have to say we have a small, like for us, it was a test. It was like a kind of pilot project. So we first pre-selected a small amount of project, like 10 projects that among 120 projects that we had in our office, these 10 that that reflects our own interests. They were about food security, more specific with they were specific. They included the gender marker for us because it was an objective. So it was kind of personal, the first 10, just to see how it worked, the tool. And then for this year, we decided to apply it to all our to all the approved proposal, to all the approved interventions from our office. So approved between 2023 and 2024, the last 2 years. In order to have a larger scale that is useful for us to understand how it would work. So by the end of this year, we will still have a small amount, like around 60 proposal assessed with this. When and how I will try to focus on aspect that first, just to tell you how we used it, and then I will focus on aspect that maybe haven't been said yet, because I agree with most of the comments that have been done so far. So I will try not to repeat, but add something more specific. So we used it to assess project proposal from a very technical point of view. I will take, from a moment, I will not speak about the budget. I will focus on the technical aspects. So really the assess on how much the principle contribute to the transformation within the different intervention in many countries. So we use it on 2 different occasions. First, in the phase of designing new project proposal. So when we receive a project proposal from our field offices, or we value the contribution of the agroecological transformation process. And in a second occasion, either the same project or new project that maybe were already existing, we use it as a lens, let's say, the lens to read and to assess how that project has been conducting its own activities that are foreseen, and how, for example, during our monitoring missions in the field. So we go and also check whether some indicators are applied and how. And we are using the box of the comments, since it's very subjective, and that you don't have like something that can be take out information from that box of comment that is related to each of the principle. We use it, for example, to identify or to indicate which specific activity of the project is more, which practices, give example of where exactly that project is contributing, where we can find that the project is really contributing to that principle. Because this, for me, is related also with the budget, with the financial aspect, because it is not that it's not only a percentage of the total amount of the budget that contributes. I can have a high level of contribution with a single activity where we invest, say, $10,000, €10,000 in a project, and they all go for one. I can say that it comes only from one principle, but then the whole amount of the project is not really reflects how much is so it's not in terms of percentage. We should maybe add, but this would require a different asset also in how it is designed. So I didn't think it was designed to go in depth. That's why we applied more for the technical aspect. We should give a certain amount of budget to each of the principles, and it should be related to a specific line of budget that we have in that. So we should be able to upload a budget with a budget proposal in the same tool. And I don't think, just to reduce a little bit the subjectivity, but I don't know how much it's feasible, because then we go in terms of what kind of line of budget, or we have many different frames. So I have to say, and wanted to say loudly, that I'm happy so far with the kind of aspect that we can analyze in this way. But as I told you at the beginning, it's specific for our office. So in order to reduce a little bit the subjectivity, for example, for the scoring between 0 and 2, we first do, say, an assessment based on the papers. So documents, what do you say on this? What is about? And we can also do it. It's like a desk job, remote job. Of course, the team who is in charge of the project, or I can ask for the help of another colleague of mine. And then we always share with some person which is a referent for the project or the initiative, from, let's say, from the other side. It could be the recipient, it could be our field office reference, so to have another point of view. So starting from the score we gave, what do you think about this? And then we adjust those little percentage, and it's of course it's still a quality, it's a sense, it's a matter of more, it's not a quantity and it's not scientific, but still can help to enter a different point of view from someone who is doing it from the field. The best thing is when we then go on the field, we do the monitoring mission, we check, and we also share with others, we catch the beneficiaries' point of view. So this is very, very useful for us as an implementing agency, and during monitoring mission, it has been very useful. And so far, these two are really too pro, I would say, because it helps us in the phase of design to have also some parameters and the indicators so formulated within each principle as very useful, because I can also give to our field offices or people who are sending us project proposal like some suggestions about how to, for example, this activity, why don't you try to involve a group or an association, a women association, in order to have more, not in terms of performance, not to improve the scoring, but to include, to be more, to do your best to apply those principles. Then when it comes to comparison, I have another pro that I would like to say. It is very useful to have the comparison of our portfolio with others members' portfolio. Though I have some doubts about what kind of comparison, let's say, it's possible, since everybody is using it maybe in a different way. And one of my questions was about when we add new criteria. It's okay that is within my portfolio, but the way of this new the weight of these criteria in the scoring, if it's still if there is still possible to compare comparable with others, with other members. So this comes like, it's more like a question. And so what is our so far what we have found out, as we would like to have, for example, together with the whole figure together, like for example the PDF that you could download, for us would be helpful to have like a section, like the one of the comments, like a box that directly connected with the initiative, that is that says, I don't know, recommendation, or something that we can then do not need to add like in a separate place, in a separate side. So, and that for us stay within the tool. So we can say, what do we do when we see the graph and we see that participation is top scored, and then animal health doesn't apply, and then within that thing, this is this is in order to answer to our need that, as I told you, we go and maybe we try to reorient some activities of other projects. So this would be private for us. It could stay in the tool. It could be useful, or it could be like still a set of thick box, like of a few sections, if it's useful for someone else, where whether you recommend, I don't know, change or something generic. No, I didn't really think in depth about this, so but I can come back to you later. A set of things that can be recommendation of a certain value, even for other members. In terms of categories, the categories that we mentioned before, for us, they do apply what's in, if they are research projects or in field or other, but they might be, I don't know if this is useful for comparison. Maybe instead of each institution, like GIZ mentioned, and even European Union, made the pre-selection of initiatives. We all together decide to, I don't know, either have category, for example, DAC codes. It's very objective, so we can say that DAC codes that are for us will be mostly rural rural development, food security, so the 3.1, the 6, for example. But we can set this code so that when we do the comparison, maybe I can filter and see how many of the initiatives are within those codes contributing effectively, because maybe most of them are, for example, many projects we have of technical assistance to government, they don't go really in the field, so they work more on policies, they were more of making capacity building of technical assistance, and we don't know exactly I mean how many agroecological practices have been applied in the field. And so I think this is all. And I'll just say something in the future, for our future use. We are not informally. Yeah, we are thinking about, in order to use also in other offices of the agency. There is the agency, the office, which is the number 7, which is in charge of CSO and especially CSO and the local and Italian entities such as regions or municipalities, and also private sector. There you have a specific call for proposal that it comes every 2 years or so. We have agroecology mentioned as we would like to include agroecology in our proposal, in the funding that we give, but there's not something specific. We would like to assign like a marker to formalize, let's say, if you respect these 3 principles according to this tool, then we can have a marker and we decide. So this would be a way to then effectively measure also this possibility. But this, in order to give this to have this, of course, we will need we will need to approve this kind of process within our administration, so it should pass all the testing phases. And maybe if you can give the last thing, it's very technical, so we can also take it separately. It's about import and export of documents, so maybe we can do it in a... Okay, I'm sorry, I was a little bit faster. Hope I mentioned everything.
No. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much, Elisa. On your last point, I think in Dave's presentation earlier, he showed that it's possible now to extract or to import large files to facilitate a little bit the inputs. Thanks very much. We're running slightly behind schedule. We would like to beg you all for, if you could say a little bit more longer, about 5-10 minutes maximum, so we could really like hear the whole feedback that we are getting from the users. As you could see from the Italian experience, the tool was actually used more in the design of projects and serve as an input in their monitoring activities. You will hear now, and I'd like to call on the IDRC person, Anja Paskal, who has working with the Canadian International Development Research Center, who has used the tool in their latest policy document. So this is a versatile feature, I would say, of the tool. There's also a question in the chat box earlier in terms of whether or not the tool can be used in policy analysis. So Anja can share her experience at IDRC in this regard. Over to you, Anja.
Hello, thank you very much, Oliver, and thanks to all of you for staying on a few extra minutes. So my name is Anja, and I'm an independent consultant. Today I'll be speaking about work that I did with the International Development Research Center in Canada as part of a team together with Jim Thomas and Susan Alexander and a team from the Institute for Agroecology in Vermont made up of Colin Anderson and Ernesto Mendez, Martha Caswell, and Faris Ahmed, whom some of you know, I believe, and Colin is also on the call. So we had quite a different mandate than the kind of work that's been described so far. So it's very interesting to see the different ways in which the tool is used and can be used. Our mandate was to support IDRC to strategically orient their programming and their investment in support of food system transformation with a principles-based approach, so using principles as a lens. Specifically, we were looking at 10 scoping papers that IDRC had commissioned and analyzing their research priorities. So I'm just going to try to share my screen and it works here.
Showing up.
Okay, I'm starting the slideshow. Can you see that properly?
Yep.
All
Okay,
good.
great.
Thanks.
Okay. So what we were asked to do was take 10 scoping papers that are listed here on 4 different themes. They were on themes of agroecology, food loss and waste, homegrown school food, and digital tools for farmers. And each of these scoping papers had assessed research priorities going forward that they felt IDRC should be investing in. So what we needed to do was analyze it through a principles-based approach. And we first looked at the range of different options for doing a principles-based assessment. And I won't get into those options now because there's no time, but we were very delighted when we landed on the agroecology finance assessment tool. It was very useful for us as it allowed for a consistent lens across extremely diverse projects for comparative reasons. So here we have the radar graphs that emerged from the assessments that we did. And you can see that they're all extremely different. And for us, that was a unique value of the tool, was being able to use one tool to assess very diverse projects and the research priorities that were coming out of those, some of which were not even related to agroecology. And I think this is a point maybe that I'll stay on for a moment because it allows a wider application of the tool than the kinds of projects that have been discussed so far. So for instance, I'll give a couple of examples. One of the projects looked at food loss and waste in informal vending in Asia. And what it called for was more research on the role of the informal sector in cooperative governance and policy making, so that the voices of the informal sector were included in governance in order to mitigate food loss and waste. So for us, this scored very high on governance, for instance, and you can see that in the radar graph that's on the second row on the right. Another example, for instance, was homegrown school food, which looked at the role of women who were very involved in all volunteer aspects of the homegrown school feeding, but were not being paid. And so the research priority was to look more into the gendered aspects, the fairness, the participation aspects, and the fairness aspects of future work on homegrown school food, pointing to the priorities to more research on those specific principles. And that scored very highly, for instance, on the social values and diets principle, which is where we located gender equity and inclusion. So for us, it was a very useful tool to be able to look at work that was not even necessarily about agroecology. And then it allowed us to do 2 further things. One was we were able to group the research priorities according to principles. So we saw, for instance, if you look at B here in front of you, that connectivity and economic diversification and fairness principles often arose together, which is very interesting. You know, this is the kind of results that would come up, for instance, in territorial markets. You know, if there was a project that we were looking at supporting territorial markets, they would score very high on connectivity, economic diversification, and fairness. So it allowed us to start looking at kind of higher level learnings around principles and principle-based approaches to transformation and what kinds of research priorities IDRC could be focusing on as a result of this. Then it allowed us to do this portfolio level graph. So the graph that you have here in front of us is those 10 radar graphs overlaid one over the next. And this is a function of the tool. The tool offers you this. You can take as many graphs as you have in your portfolio, put them all together. And so what this gives us is a snapshot of the research priorities being advanced by those 10 scoping teams through the lens of the 13 principles. What this showed us was that these 10 scoping teams were telling IDRC that there was nearly twice as much need for a focus on food system level principles research, such as connectivity and fairness, participation, as opposed to the agroecosystem level principles that are more about soil health, soil fertility, and that these food systems level principles and priorities for research were the ones that would support food system transformation more. Research in these areas would support food system transformation more. This, you can imagine that when you're doing an analysis of 10 very large research projects, you're trying to find what are the research priorities telling us about what would be future investments that would be really strategic for food system transformation. To be able to have this kind of data coming out of an analysis was extremely valuable. So for us, the AFAT tool served us very well. And it brought forward this overall finding that in order to support food system transformation, there's a significant need for research that goes beyond food production to tackle wider food system challenges and opportunities, always with the proviso that the core element and beautiful aspect of agroecology is that all 13 principles are interrelated. And so we must keep them always all in the picture to the extent possible. So for us, a principles-based approach and the use of AFAT were really helpful in having, an inclusive and constructive ways to advance research. And I would just add perhaps one quick note on our experience as a group, because that's come up quite a bit. So we developed an internal guide for our team in order to have consistency across people who were doing the analysis. So for instance, Tommaso was talking about the subjectivity of the 0.1, 0.2, 0.3 scoring. We decided we would only score in 0.5 increments across our group. So 0 to 0.5 to 1, 1.5 to 2. And our guide also included guidance, for instance, IDRC has a very significant priority around gender equity and inclusion. And we decided we would situate material on gender in the social values and diets pillar specifically, even though it applies across many others, and we would take it into account. But if we were specifically looking at gender research priorities, we would situate them there. So that was very helpful, I think, for a group. It yielded, so what we did with that then was that we identified 6 key levers for research in support of food system transformation. If anybody's interested, please feel free to contact me. That's my little cliffhanger. Suspense that I'm putting in there just for fun, because there's no time to talk about it. And also on the subject of AI, I would say for us, that really would not have worked. It was really important that we knew the material well, that there was a thoughtful human analysis. The hallucination rates on AI are very, very high. And I think it would be, for me, it would be concerning to put those kinds of decisions or assessments in the hands of AI. And also, I would say that our data set could be an interesting test case if Dave's team, for instance, was interested. Because it's such a small data set, it could be possible to share the base documents. Perhaps I'd have to check with IDRC, but I think they would be open to it. Share the scoping papers with Dave's team, and they could see what it comes up with, run through AI, compare it to what we came up with through a human process, since it's such a small data set. So that was just one idea that I had as we were moving along.
So one cliffhanger and one idea. Thanks very much, Anna, for sharing that. I mean, thanks for everybody for staying with us. I just wanted to flag a few questions that were raised in the chat box. And if you could spend very, very quickly, maybe in the last 2 minutes or so, anybody from the speakers, from Emile to Dave to all the others who shared their experiences, to probably comment on any of the points that I will mention here that you would want to react to. One, there is a question around the possibility to link this tracking tool to the true cost accounting framework that is being populated, developed, and promoted by different groups, including, among others, the Global Alliance for the Future of Food. There is comment around the social and labor dimension of large-scale agroecology transformation. How is that captured and assessed? Because this is often not necessarily in the radar of many donors. There's also a point around avoiding double reporting. For instance, if one recipient uses it or doubled, or like there are 2 donors co-funding one initiative and they are reported twice, how do you avoid that and make sure that, there's not double counting? And the other one is around applicability on the use of the tracking tool to the private sector funding, because essentially this is what it is tracking is public finance, ODAs, etc. So those are the points that I have captured in the chat box. Maybe anybody of our speakers, those who share their experiences, your thoughts about this, or maybe those who are involved in the development of the tool, Dave or Emile, you may comment on any of this. Link to the TCA, the social and labor dimension, how it is being captured, how to avoid double counting or double reporting, and then applicability beyond the public sector. Anyone?
Maybe starting very quickly. First of all, this is not exact science, and trying to make this really reflect to the last penny exactly what we intended to fund, I think is not realistic. We have to strike the right balance between what is feasible in a sufficiently simple way to get an overall view of how the evolution of funding is going, and and to identify gaps in areas that are not well covered. Trying to do much more than that, I think, would require something much more sophisticated and much taking an awful lot of more time. Regarding the double counting, the sources of funding and who the funding is going to is included in the tool. So that allows you to track back and identify potential double counting. And so that is being taken care of. And I think also we should say that the additional criteria do not influence the overall scoring, because the scoring is done only on the 13 principles, not on additional criteria. So I leave it at that for sake of brevity.
Thanks, Emile. Any others who would want to react to any of the points that I have just mentioned? Dave, Alexander, Anja, Tommaso, Anna, Marion, Elisa, anybody from? None? Okay, yes. All right, there's none. Okay. Yeah, so in the interest of the time, what I wanted to share is that, well, to mention is that we know that agroecology cannot be supported through like business as usual funding. And funding and finance for agroecology needs to embrace new metrics, innovative modalities, but also in terms of timeframes in implementing, monitoring, and capturing those things. We need to know how truly agroecological initiatives are, and it is important to ensure that we are able to track whatever resources, both new and realigned, are flowing in support of agroecology as a pathway for food systems transformation. But the agroecology finance assessment and tracking tool is useful for this purpose, but we need to have more donors and convince more donors to take up the tool, and for donors to really engage with their peers in fostering and promoting its use, as well as in working towards, better complementarity and concerted action. So with that, I'd like to thank all of you on behalf of the Agroecology Coalition and the Agroecology Fund for, number one, joining us, number two, for staying 11 minutes beyond what was planned for this sharing session. The video will be made available online as well, so those who aren't able to join us can watch it, and for those who would want to rewatch it, feel free to do so and share it with your peers. There are a couple of resources that was already shared in the chat box. We'll also make sure you check them and stay in touch. You have the QR codes to link with us at the Coalition or Agroecology Fund, and another QR code there to discover the tool even further. Thanks very much. Grazie a tutti. Merci beaucoup. E alla prossima volta. Thanks, everybody. Ciao.
Bye.
Ciao, ciao. Ciao a tutti.
Bye.
Thanks a lot, Oliver and everyone.
Thank you.